do you deal with conflicting feelings? How do you decide which ones to act on? Or maybe you decide not to act at all because you don't know what to do. You have all these different feelings. And as opposed to trying to sort them out, figure out exactly what you need to do, you're like, I'm just going to do nothing. I'm going to not think about this anymore. I'm not going to try to feel any of this anymore. And therefore, I'm not going to do anything about it. And then maybe it'll just take care of itself because I can't deal with this. I don't know what to do. Every time I try to think about it, I think, well, I might do this. And then I think, no, because I feel like this. And then it's like, well, okay, then I'll go that route. And then it's, no, but I can't because that would make me feel like this. And so you can't make up your mind. And so you just decide, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to think about it anymore. And hopefully it'll work itself out. That is the way that David dealt with his conflicting feelings. It seems like everything that he was trying to figure out to do with Amnon. Remember, we talked about Amnon last week and how he was in love with his half-sister and he cooked up this plan to sleep with her, and when she refused him, he raped her. And David found out about this and he did nothing. And most likely it's because he loved Amnon. He didn't want to, do what needed to be done with that. And he probably didn't want to let the whole world know everything that had happened in his family. But then he was also angry. And so he's just like, I don't know what to do. I love him. I'm mad. I don't want everybody to know. I don't know how to handle this. I'm just going to do nothing. I'll just be mad and do nothing. And he continues this pattern with the next son this week. And because he did nothing with Amnon, Absalom decided he needed to do something himself. And so after 2 years, Absalom is like, I'm still furious. Dad's done nothing. Tamar is in my house and she can't ever marry. And so I'm sure he's watching her every day be upset. And he's thinking someone needs to do something about this. And so he decides that he's going to take matters into his own hands. So it's about the time for him to shear his sheep. And at this time, a lot of the people would have big feasts because they have lots of days that they have to be away from home doing all of these things. And so they would have big parties. And so Absalom decides to have a big party and he invites his whole family. But David's like, that's too many people for you to deal with. I don't think we need to go. And he says, well, can Amnon at least go? And that seems pretty suspicious to David for him to specify that brother specifically, providing that they haven't been talking for the last 2 years. And so he asks Absalom about it. Why do you want him specifically to go? And he just keeps saying, come on, let everybody go. I want this to happen. And finally, David's like, fine, the rest of your brothers can go. I'm staying home. I'm not going to go. And so Absalom decides that on this trip, he is going to kill Amnon for what he's done to his sister Tamar. And so he tells his servants, hey, I'm going to get Amnon drunk. And then when I give the order, I want you to kill him. And they must have looked like, wait, you're kidding me. I don't know about this, because he says, hey, you're just following orders. I take all the responsibility. Nobody can blame you for this because you're doing what you were told. And so he gets him drunk, gives the order, and they kill him. Everybody obviously disperses after this, and David gets word that Absalom has killed all of his sons. And so he is distraught, obviously, but Jonadab, remember, he was the cousin that convinced Amnon to cook up this plan anyway. We don't know if he was asking him to rape her, but he knew that he was, getting him to get her alone so that he could sleep with her. And he says, no, Absalom didn't kill everyone, just Amnon. And he decided this the day that Amnon raped Tamar. He was going to make him pay for this. And so that's what happened. And he says, look, as a matter of fact, the rest of your sons are coming up now. And so when the rest of the sons got to David, it says that they all cried together over Amnon. But Absalom knew better than to come home, so he didn't come with the rest of the brothers. He decided to flee to his grandfather's place in Jeshurun, which was across the Jordan River. And remember, he was the king of Jeshurun. And so, David's not going to bother him there, and he's going to go and live with his grandpa. But it says that every single day for the next 3 years, David missed Amnon. But his heart also longed for Absalom. He's lost two sons in one day. And so he's got such conflicting feelings. And so his conflicting feelings did not end with what to do about Amnon. Now he doesn't know what to do about Absalom. He misses him, but he's mad and he doesn't know how to deal with it. And Joab, remember, this is David's nephew who's been with him the whole time and is the commander of his army. He senses this. He realizes that David misses Absalom, but he's hesitant to bring him home. He sees that he's angry. And so Joab cooks up this plan to maybe get David to bring Absalom home. And he gets this woman to go to David and tell him her story, a fabricated story, that maybe will make David think about himself. And remember, this is what Nathan did too. Nathan brought David a story about two men to let him see how he had treated Uriah with Bathsheba. And so Joab doesn't bring the story directly to David. He has this woman go to him, but it's the same concept. And so when the woman gets to David, she falls on her face and she begs him to help her. And she says, I'm a widow and I have two sons left. And one day they were fighting in the fields, and one of my sons struck the other son and killed him. And now the whole clan wants me to hand over my only living son to avenge the brother's murder. So they want to kill him for killing his brother. And she's like, but I don't want this to happen. And if it does, then my husband's going to be left with no heirs. And so will you please make it stop? Tell all the Avengers of Blood that they can't kill him, and the bloodshed just needs to stop. And David says, I don't know what to do exactly about your son. And so just go home and let me think about it. And this doesn't solve the problem that the woman is actually going to him for, though, because she needs an answer. She's trying to give this scenario to make him think. And even though, her son did it in a fit of rage and Absalom didn't kill Amnon in a fit of rage, he is facing the death penalty if he comes back for killing his brother. But also it explains the sadness that a parent feels when their son is facing the death penalty, even if they're facing the death penalty for killing their own child, right? It's this dilemma she's presenting him with, saying, I know my son probably deserves death for killing his brother, but I can't bear to see it as a parent. And this is exactly how David might feel. He may be feeling, I can't deal with this myself because, yes, Absalom does deserve the death penalty according to, the law for killing his brother, but also I don't want to lose another son, right? Both of them don't want to lose both sons. And this story also tells us that Joab must feel like maybe David is mostly concerned about bringing him home because of the people, because that's the scenario that he's presenting with this lady. It's like all the people are calling for her son to be murdered. And the people might want that for Absalom too, except they don't know why Absalom killed him. Because if they knew why Absalom killed him, they might think what David might be thinking is that, well, that was justice, depending on what cut off from his people means Amnon deserved to be cut off from his people, it says, for raping his half sister. And if that means death, then that's what Absalom was giving him. And if it means exile, then yeah, maybe he gave him a little harsher punishment than what he deserved, but David wasn't doing anything about it, and so he took matters into his own hands. And now he's being exiled for what Amnon deserved to be exiled for. And so the people don't know this whole complication, but David does. And so, maybe Joab is thinking that the people would be calling for this death of Absalom. And he's telling David, don't worry about what the people want. You're the king. You can just, waive that punishment. And so if you can understand how this woman feels, and she wants her punishment waived, and you're willing to do that, then you should just do that for Absalom. This is what Joab is thinking. And so they're trying to get him to do that, to say, I'll waive your punishment. And so whenever David says, go home, and I'll, think about it and I'll get back to you, she's like, no, I'll take the blame for whatever happens. Just go ahead and tell me, please save my son's life. And David's like, no, I'm not going to do that yet, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll stay it, basically. I'm not giving you a verdict, but I'm not going to allow the people to kill him in the meantime. And so if the people keep harassing you, saying, bring me your son so we can avenge your other son's death, then send them to me, and I will prevent them from doing that until I reach a decision. And then she just plays the desperate mother card. She's like, no, I need assurances that my son's not going to die. Please tell them no more bloodshed. I don't want anyone else to die. Please just make it stop. And so finally David's like, all right, fine. Yeah, no more death. Your son doesn't have to face the death penalty. I'm waiving it all. Mercy on him. Let's move on. And then the woman, because the whole point was to get David to realize what was going on, she says, thank you so much, but also you should pronounce this verdict to yourself, because you are not waiving the sentence that Absalom is serving right now. In the same way that you waived it for my son, you won't waive it for your own son. And so you should do that, because here's the deal. Yes, he killed your son, but he's dead. There's nothing that can be done about that now. And so killing Absalom to avenge his death does nothing except for give you two dead sons. That's what I was trying to show you in the story. She doesn't tell him that, but she's like, I relate to you, David. Listen, death is permanent, but exile doesn't have to be permanent. This son's still alive. You can still save him from the verdict. He doesn't have to be banished away from you, and you don't have to lose two sons. You've already lost one. There's nothing you can do about it, but you could save this one, just like you just saved mine. And then she brings the story back to her son, because, she doesn't want to look obvious, and she doesn't want to be reprimanding the king for all that long. And so then she says, just like you did for my son, you can do for yours. I had hope, and that's why I came to you, and you did this, and so thank you. Well, now David gets it. Now David realizes what the woman was doing in the first place. And so he says, did Joab put you up to this? And she's like, okay, yes, he did. But he did it for a good reason. He cares about you, and he was trying to reconcile you and your son. And I agree with him. I think that was wise of him to do. And that's why I came and presented you with this story. And so David is done talking to her, because he realizes she's not the one to give the answer to anyway. And he turns to Joab and he says, bring Absalom home. Fine, you can bring him home. And then Joab praises him, tells him thank you, says, I appreciate it so much. I'm so glad that you had favor on me, that you listened to me, and you're doing this. And then he went and got Absalom and brought him back home. But when he got there, David didn't want to see him. He said he can come back home, but he's going to live in his own house and he's not setting foot in the king's house. I don't want to see his face again. And so Absalom went and lived by himself. And it says that Absalom had 3 sons and 1 daughter. And he named this daughter Tamar. And she was a very beautiful woman. And it says that Absalom was the most handsome man in all of Israel. There was no flaw in him from head to toe. And his hair was so luscious that he had to cut it every single year just because it was so long and heavy on his head. It was so heavy, as a matter of fact, that it weighed 5 pounds he grew 5 pounds of hair every single year. And so this is, a very handsome man. Everybody, thinks he's like the greatest thing to look at. And but David doesn't care about him. He doesn't want to see him. He isn't going to look at his son. He wants him to stay away from him. And after 2 years, Absalom's like, I can't take this anymore. And he calls for Joab, and thinking maybe he can get Joab to get him a meeting with his father and they can put this whole thing behind them. But Joab won't come to him. And so he calls him again. Joab still won't come. And so we don't know why exactly. Some people speculate that Joab had ulterior motives whenever he brought Absalom back in the first place, because otherwise, why would he bring him back whenever he is, not going to keep trying to reconcile them? He said he was bringing him back to reconcile them, and so why doesn't he keep doing it if that was his real motivation? But I think personally that most likely he's just like, they're in the same town. I did my part. I'm not going to push my luck with the king. Hopefully his heart will soften at some point and they'll get back together. And so I'm just not going to further involve myself. That's what I'm assuming, but who knows? Either way, he doesn't want to go to meet with Absalom. And so Absalom just tells his servants, hey, go and set his field on fire. And so they do. And this obviously gets Joab's attention. And so he goes to Absalom and he says, what in the world are you doing? Why are you setting my field on fire? And he said, well, I kept calling you to the house and you wouldn't come and see me. So I figured this is the only way to get you over here. And so he's like, fine, what do you want? And he said, I want a meeting with my dad. I don't know why he brought me all the way back here from Jeshurun if I'm not going to get to be part of the family. If he's just going to keep blaming me, keep punishing me, then why am I even here? And so I want to talk to him. And if he decides to kill me whenever I get there, then fine. If he still blames me and he thinks that I deserve death, then whatever. But I'm done with this. I'm not going to sit here in limbo any longer. And apparently he's just banking on the fact that David will feel too guilty to kill him, knowing that, he was actually avenging his sister and he will not do it. Or, that he will just love him enough. Once he sees him face to face, he will soften. I don't know if you've ever done that, but I've done that with people that I love. I'm really, really angry with them. But the second that I see them, it's just like it all melts away. And so maybe he's thinking that that is what David will do. And whatever he's assuming his reasoning will be, we don't know, but David does do it. Whenever he sees him, immediately he kisses him, and we assume that they are reconciled. And we'll see next week if they are truly reconciled, how long it lasts, and who was actually genuine in this situation. But it's too long of a story to keep going in that realm. And I want to just talk about this fact that David didn't deal with Amnon, and that caused Absalom to deal with him. And then also that he didn't know how to deal with Absalom, and so he wasn't going to deal with him either. This is the scenario we were talking about earlier, where all of his feelings are conflicted, and so he's just like, I'm just going to do nothing instead. And it just keeps causing problems for him, this doing nothing about it because he doesn't know what to do. And we talked about last week, it makes sense why he didn't punish Amnon. He doesn't know how to punish him correctly. And, you know, maybe it would have been okay for him to grant him mercy if he would have at least called him to him and gotten some sort of repentance from Amnon, and then granted him mercy in some regard, some sort of punishment, but not a harsh punishment. Then maybe that would have made sense. But providing that he did nothing, this made Absalom have to take matters into his own hands.